Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning. It is the Michael Dukes Show. Hi, how are you? Howdy. Packed show today. Big jam-packed show. We got a lot going on. And we're about ready to kick this things off. We're about to light this candle. Joining us this morning in hour one, Sarah Vance, representative from Homer, are going to be joining us here in just a hot minute. And we're going to be talking about her priorities down in the legislature, what she's focused on, her committees, and get kind of the straight dope from her after a couple, 4 weeks here of session to see where she's at. Also, of course, talk about the big hot button issues of the day, which seem to be pervading almost all the conversation, which includes discussions of the BSA increase and, of course, the defined benefits plan. Those will all be part of our discussion this morning in hour one. In hour two, we're going to be talking with Representative David Eastman, who has asserted that he lost some staffers earlier this week and that it was kind of in direct contravention of what he had been promised by the majority. So we'll see what the scoop is there and get a take on that. And then next week, we'll probably have Kathy Tilton and some others from leadership on to talk a little bit about what their position is on it. So we'll just, we're going to kind of get a little bit of he said, she said over the next few days. But today is, of course, locked and loaded and ready to go. And we're going to get jumping in right here because we don't have a lot of time. She's got a meeting early on this morning. So we're going to dive into it here right now with Representative Sarah Vance from Homer. And we'll get started right now. Good morning, Representative. How is you this morning?
Good morning. It is extremely early, Michael. I know we talk about this every time, but
every time you are just
not get any easier.
You must be a night owl. That's all I can say. Because I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, getting up and doing the thing and being early, and I don't know. I'm kind of used to it now. So I don't know. It is what it is. But thank you for getting up so early and coming in and joining us and being part of it today. We really appreciate it. I know it's not easy, but we appreciate you doing it anyway. So Sarah, let's kick things off here. It's been a little bit, a hot minute since we talked. And I think you had just basically started to unpack the last time we were down there. And here we are 3 weeks later or whatever. And now you can give us kind of a rundown of, of what's happening in the big city. I mean, what are we focused on? Maybe we should just take the elephants in the room to begin with and start there. We saw some crazy stuff happen in the last few days on two of the biggest items that it seems like everybody, quote unquote, wants to have happen, which of course is the base student allocation increase and the defined benefits plan. We saw the defined benefits plan get rammed through community and regional affairs in like 23 seconds without a fiscal note, or maybe there was a fiscal note, but it just didn't get shown. Or I mean, I don't know. It's all dirty politics. Who knows? But why don't we start off there? Let's talk about these issues that everybody else seems to want to talk about. And those of us who are pumping the brakes are getting castigated for hating children. So let's talk about that. What's your hot take on all this?
Well, the first thing is that I'm relieved that those are not my committees. I am not dealing in those. People say, hey, you're brave for taking on the fish wars, but hey, that's my jam. It's my district. Give me fish wars over the fight over the BSA any day, and defined benefits for that matter. And, chair judiciary, the governor just dropped 3 crime bills yesterday that I will be considering and taking up in my committee. So I'll be very busy besides talking about the BSA and defined benefits. Those are 2 really important items that obviously there's a big push for, but I think the public can't assume that everyone wants them as presented.
Well, I mean, but no, that's not what the paper said. The paper said everyone wants them. That in fact, if you don't want them, you must hate children and eat puppies and kittens for lunch, because that's what they say. Because you mean legislators have not given a single dollar to education in 20 years. What's the matter with you? That's hyperbolic, by the way, because that's not exactly, but I mean, that's the insinuation. I mean, right? Am I wrong? I mean, when you read these newspaper articles, you like, the legislature they haven't increased education funding in 20 years. And what, I mean, which we know is false. They haven't increased the BSA much. They've increased it by 4.5%, something like that, just under 5%. They really wanted like 18 or 20% increase, which great. We can argue about that. But to say that we just haven't increased education funding, I mean, we had the other Sarah Montalbano from the Alaska Policy Forum on last couple of weeks ago on a Monday, and she laid out the timeline and said, look, in the last, it was like last 18 years, 15 years, 18, the school costs have increased, 35% increase in school spending. They act like the BSA is the only thing the schools are getting. But this is part of the problem, is that it is a perception problem that the public has, because they're not fully informed, because they're busy. I'm not criticizing them, but they're basically getting their news from the headlines, and they read it and they go, oh yeah, well, I'm for the children, so of course we should increase that if that's what we need. Nobody's getting the full story.
Correct. And the whole reason that a formula, the base student allocation, is a formula, those pesky formulas keep getting in our way. It was created to take some of the politics out of the funding for the schools. And yet here we are every year. It's the same conversation, as if they've never been talking about it, like as if it's a fresh ask. And it's simply not true. We did increase the BSA by $30 last year in the Alaska Reads Act, which isn't much, but nonetheless, it's more than what they had before. The whole consternation that I have with just automatically increasing the BSA is, what problems are we solving by doing that? I know that the schools have needs just like everyone else, but I want to zero in on what some of the problems are and find solutions. So if I've introduced House Bill 21, which is a school university healthcare consolidation that allows school districts, municipalities, and the University of Alaska to consolidate under the Alaska Care Health Plan if they want to. And what I'm hearing is that the numbers from the Matsu could save up to $3,000 per employee and that's like $7 million
Right.
just in the Matsu. That's not chump change.
No.
So,
Multiply-
that is taking off the pressure.
Yeah, multiply that by 53 school districts and see what you come up with when it's all said and done, plus the university. I mean, and that's the problem is that, you say, well, we only gave him a $30 increase. Well, we had the discussion yesterday with Mike Schauer talking about, hey, $1 in does not equal $1 out. $1 in could equal $10 out potentially. And so, yeah, there has been increases and there are increases. And I think that's the whole problem here. And the bottom line is that this formula, it has two problems. One, there's no accountability in an increase in the formula as proposed right now. There's no way to say, okay, well, we'll give you the money, but you have to guarantee that you will increase scholastic achievement by X, Y, and Z, or at least give us a metric or something to do. The second problem is that an increase in the BSA is not a guaranteed increase of increased dollars into the actual classroom, because the BSA is heavily canted to taking care of administration and overhead and paying those parts of the bills and increasing that side of the ledger instead of the actual classroom side.
Well, that's why I'm introducing that bill, and it's gaining traction because the option of consolidating healthcare will take some of the pressure off of the school funding so that they can focus it in other areas besides healthcare. That's something that they found that, teachers for recruitment and retention are struggling with is, should we stay in the job that we have because of the high cost of healthcare, because they have to provide for their families. So I'm trying to provide a solution besides just throwing more money at the problem. I'm one of those people that says, okay, maybe I'd be open to an increase in the BSA if there were parent choice in education. If the funding follows the child, then we can talk.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's an obvious opening there, which of course, they hate that idea. Totally. They totally hate that idea. But I mean, something's got to change. You cannot be expending almost more than any other place in the nation. We're in like the third position as far as highest spend per student, and yet still received, results that are in the bottom two. You just can't keep doing that. That's the definition of insanity. Let's break over to the idea here of the defined benefits plan. I mean, talk about going from the frying pan into the fire, or pouring gasoline right on a house fire. This idea that somehow we can all do this revenue neutral, and we've heard that several times from one of the legislators who's proposing, we'd save money if we did this. It'd be. I'm sorry, sir. History says no. I mean, past performance is indicative of future results, and we still owe $7 billion from the previous defined benefits programs that we had, down from $13 billion. It's been 2006. What's that? 18 years, 16 years now since we stopped the defined benefits, and we still owe 2/3 of that unfunded liability. And now it's been forced through one of the committees. It's still got 3 more committees to go through, so it's got a tough time. But I can't believe we're actually talking about this right now in the midst of a fiscal crisis.
Well, and that's the issue is, we want to help people, but at what cost? There's constitutional concerns that when we change the retirement structure, that you can't backpedal on that. That is a huge fiscal responsibility moving forward that we're stuck with, as you pointed out, for a very long time. And, I always put the measure to, public and private. Are they on a level playing field? And no one is doing defined benefits because no one can afford it anymore. And that's what we need to look at, is just the simple dollars and cents of how we're going to pay for it. And I don't think there is as many legislators comfortable with this as what the media is trying to convey.
Well, that's good, because the media is like, it's kumbaya and everybody's for this, and this is how we'll solve our worker crisis and yada. I mean, look, the thing is that what we keep ignoring is a couple things. First, we keep ignoring that there is a worker shortage nationwide. in almost every industry. I mean, every industry is a problem. The second thing that we keep ignoring is, as you pointed out, is this constitutional component of it. We are one of only 2 states in the union that have a provision in their constitution which essentially says that any contract entered into with with an employee group or something like that is actually has the binding provision of like a constitutional, oh, look at that, a constitutional mandate. I mean, and so what you're essentially doing is any legislature that does this is binding over future legislators, whether times will be good or times will be bad. They're binding over future legislators to say, you have to pay this. And it's constitutionally protected and mandated. This is a huge step, potentially off of a cliff that we cannot come back from.
Correct. And that's what really gets my attention is this isn't just something that's going to last a few years. It's not a one-time allocation, that's going to be 1 or 2 years in the budget. This is a constitutional obligation that we're agreeing to if we agree to this, and it has implications for potentially generations. Good and bad. I'm not saying that defined benefits are evil, but they are certainly a huge responsibility. And that's what I'm looking at, because we, like you said, until we solve the fiscal issue of having a long-term fiscal plan, we should not be considering any of this, of these larger financial obligations until we have a plan. And I think that needs to be one of our top priorities.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, again, ensuring and shackling us to a long-term, highly volatile and costly plan in the midst of a fiscal crisis seems to be the height of what I'd like to call arrogance. I mean, really, that's kind of what I'm saying right now. All right, Sarah Vance is our guest. We're going to continue with her here in just a moment. We're going to be back with more in just a few with Sarah Vance, representative down on the Southern Peninsula there in Homer. She's in Juneau, but she represents that area. You know what I meant. Yeah, I haven't had coffee yet this morning, which in and of itself is a calamity. All right, we're going to be back. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
All right. No, it's definitely not Michael Duke Show beard curler coffee in that container, because there is none right now. I'm still trying to get the next batch. This whole pandemic thing has really screwed up my own personal coffee regimen, because I mean, even I don't have any beard curler coffee in my cupboard right now. I think I'm drinking North Pole Coffee Roasters Snickerdoodle, I think is what I'm drinking right now. Ooh. Which is delicious. It is not as good as mine, but it is delicious. My personal opinion. But so anyway, you got it done. I see you're doing the French press and everything.
Oh, yeah. I'm hooked.
I know. I use a French press sometimes, but usually what I used to use a French press for was that I would make we had a friend that we met I don't know, when Terry and I met 25 years ago or something, a couple from Bolivia, and they taught us how to make the coffee Bolivian style. They'll take a pound of coffee and a gallon of water, and they'll put it in a big jug, and they'll put it in the fridge for 2 or 3 days, and then they'll French press it out, and it's a concentrate, and you just put it in the bottom of the glass and pour some hot water on it. Some of the best coffee drinking you'll ever do. Oh, so good.
It takes out the bitterness that way.
Does. Oh, the acidity, and that was always my problem, is that I would get heartburn, and it was like no acidity, no bitterness, so delicious. Anyway, cold brew. It was cold brewing, basically. I'm sorry. Obviously, I'm jonesing for some coffee this morning. All right, feel free to pour your own and get ready to go. Sarah, we're going to talk up next about your your priorities and what you're doing. I am so jealous right now. She's making coffee on the stream. All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Great gracefully, get the plunger down.
You don't want to splurt it. That's the thing. You don't want to.
It's a mess if I do.
It's a splurt. But you've got some priorities, and of course, with your committees and everything else, there's things that you're going to be watching. You touched on it a little bit with judiciary. And there's been a lot of discussion about the judiciary lately. I don't know if you heard last week we had David Haig on to talk about the grand jury situation here in the state and some of the other issues. And I know that there are some legislative fixes to that. Now, the question is, of course, whether or not there's actually the political will to fix a judiciary who looks like they may be running amok. But we can hit on all that when we get back on the air. What's your take overall on how things are going down there? I mean, is it? I think it's obviously. I mean, this is an obvious question, but it's better to be in the majority than the minority. Yeah, I mean, just give me your take here.
It is. The difference is that there's a greater level of responsibility to govern. I am busy in a way that things have to get done because people are relying on me. Where I was busy before because I chose to really put my heart and soul into every bill, every committee, into helping my district. And this time is, I set the calendar on the bills through my committee. I set the pace. We have to make sure that everything is ready to go so that the public can engage. And there's a soberness about that. And I've been looking forward to this for 4 years, and I think it's going to be great. There's a different mood in the building, which, according to Senator Shower, is tangible among the majority, and it's good. It's about time. One of the things that I just did recently, if you watch my Judiciary Committee yesterday, is that I announced that the public is welcome to join us in the committee room. I had the maintenance crew come on and come in and shorten the committee table so that we could increase the chairs for the public. And what a difference. What a difference it makes in just having space for the public to come and join us. Now, I know that there's the issue that we're not connected to the road system, but nonetheless,
you knew where that was going. Wouldn't it be nice if we were actually on the road system so that the whole public could participate?
Right. Alaska Airlines does offer a 30% constituent discount.
Yeah. Well, good on you. All right, hold the line. We're about to jump back into this and make it so. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Don. That's right, not your daddy's talk radio show. Definitely not your daddy. There's only 5 of those out there. They're limited edition. That's what they are. The Michael Duke Show, continuing now. Representative Sarah Vance is our guest. We were just talking with her about the kind of the change in Juneau now that she's in the majority. And of course, that leads to the questions of the things that she's doing and what her focus is on with her committees and everything else. And so let's jump back into that. Sarah, you were just saying you made some changes in judiciary, opening it to the public. What? I mean, the public should actually be able to participate in these meetings. Some pretty amazing stuff. It's good stuff. So tell us a little bit about your priorities for this session on the judiciary and with every other committee that you're dealing with right now.
Well, I chair 2 committees. I chair House Judiciary and the Special Committee on Fisheries that keep us plenty busy. And then I'm now a vice chair of transportation, and then I sit on legislative budget and audit and tribal affairs as well. I think that's all. I forget.
Hard to keep track of. You got so many now, right? I mean,
I do. It's madness. And right now, the priority is the budget. We've started the budget subcommittees this week, and every standing committee has a couple of budget subcommittees. Like in judiciary, we oversee the Department of Law and the judicial branch, the courts. So we have to take a deep dive into their budgets. And so we've started that this week. I'm also the transportation budget, and those will be covered over the next 3 to 4 weeks by all the members, that we take a look into that and make recommendations to the finance committee. So that's the first priority. I have given my fisheries committee time to look at the fish and game budget, just because our schedule is so crowded. But during that time here in, I believe on the 21st, we're going to bring in the bycatch task force and have them talk about the work that they did and ask the question, where do we go from here? I know that the public is anxious to be able to have that conversation. That's one of the topics that I'm going to be highlighting. And also, I want to bring a balance to the fisheries committee. We have a lot of in-river use issues up in the Yukon and the interior, and give them a voice again, so that we can have a robust committee. On judiciary, my priority is going to be taking a look at human trafficking and crimes against children. That's a conversation that we have not had in the House Judiciary in quite some time. And also a lot of the other issues that are important to the public, but I can't reveal all of my plans just yet.
She was clacking her fingernails together. I cannot reveal all of my plans together. Well, yeah, because we know that there's a lot of public angst over certain components of it. We talked about it here just a minute ago, talked about the grand jury and some judicial retention and some other things. So it's going to be really interesting to see what comes out of this, and we will look forward to what you might be focusing on and pushing on that. Give me a 10,000-foot view of the room, of the legislature itself as you look at what's going on here. I mean, the House Republicans forming this coalition with the Bush caucus, I think, is probably the best outcome that we could have hoped for based on the pre-existing condition of what was going on in the Senate. You guys are now kind of the stopgap or the stumbling block for this light speed kind of stuff that we're seeing coming out of the Senate right now. What do you can you give me some predictions or projections of what you think happens here over the next 13 weeks as we move forward towards the end of the session? What do you think?
I think we're going to see some interesting alignments, interesting people working together and trying to take a dive into some of the bigger issues. Right now, obviously, the attention is focused on the BSA and the defined benefits, but that's only if we allow it to consume our time. There's a lot of other really important issues that need to be addressed. And I think that because we weren't just handed a full Republican majority, we have to work harder at threading the needle with our Bush caucus and making sure that we take into considerations what's going to happen in the Senate, because we can't just throw over a lot of things and act offended when they don't want to take it up and consider it. Right. So, if we're going to be wise about this, we're going to work on things in a way that really matters, that can get some traction, that isn't just poking the Senate in the eye.
Right. Well, and one of the things that I'm excited to see is, of course, you got Representative Ben Carpenter, who is going to be on Ways and Means. And, of course, they've been tasked with creating a fiscal plan. I mean, that's the thing that we've been complaining about on this program. Well, I've been complaining about it for 20 years. But really, over the last few years, especially with that first taking of the PFD and this ongoing fiscal crisis that seems to always, one year we've got too much money that we don't even know how to spend it, according to one of the former senators. We got so much money, we don't know what to do with it. But for the most part, there's always some kind of deficit. There's always something else that wants to be paid for. There's always this, and it always goes back to the PFD. And all of that stems back from the fact that we don't have a long-term fiscal plan in this state. And so the Ways and Means Committee has been tasked with it. Ben Carpenter, who is on the Fiscal Policy Working Group, is steering that bus, so to speak. And I think it's, to me, if there's anything that comes out of this session that we should really be focusing on, and I'm all for a full PFD and all that, don't get me wrong, but unless we take care of and fix the long-term fiscal plan in the state, we're always going to have this fight. We will be having this fight 15 years from now. If there's even a PFD left at that point, we will be having that fight, 10 or 15 years from now.
I agree. And if there's any one placement in the majority, I say placement, I don't know, my vocabulary is low this morning, position of leadership, it has been Carpenter in Ways and Means and the legislative budget and audit. I mean, he has really proven himself to be stellar in finance. He doesn't get emotional about the numbers, and he's able to look at that accountability and really what's best for us long term. He kind of takes that dad approach that says, hey, we have to make some hard decisions here because I love you and I care about you. We're going to have to just kind of suck it up for a little bit, but
Right.
Trust me, in the end, it's going to work out for the best. And he's that guy. This is exactly where he needs to be because he's been trying to have that conversation about a long-term fiscal plan for the past 4 years. And now he's finally in the position to really guide that. And he's scheduled Ways and Means Committee in the evening so that you as the public can participate.
Right. Which, again, thank you. I mean, really, we'd love to be able to do that. Thank you very much. Which leads me back to the question again of the report and recommendations of the committee, the original committee, fiscal policy working group, which again, a very diverse group of people. I mean, we always hit on this, but I think it bears repeating that you had a group that had extremes from the left and from the right and from the middle, and they all came together and unanimously said, we've got to deal with this. We've got to deal with it not one piece at a time, but holistically. Here's a plan. Here's a suggestion. And then last session, it got mentioned like once mentioned. It wasn't gone through. They didn't go pour over it. They didn't debate that. It was mentioned in passing like 1 or 2 times. Now, I know we talked with Kathy Tilton. We've talked with Ben. Now we've talked with you. This, it was kind of intimated that this is going to kind of be a roadmap and a blueprint for a fiscal policy. Are you guys all on the same sheet of music on that? Is that the direction we're headed?
Well, we're just getting those conversations going. I tell you, everyone's been so busy getting established in the committees and making sure that those are running and getting the budget going because, for the past 4 years, the 2 beginnings of the session, we were delayed by 31 days. And that set the budget and everything back.
Right,
so
right.
We are committed to being, ready to govern and getting our work done and having the hard conversations, trying to map that out so that there's no more delay. We have taken that seriously in the public. So we've focused on all of that aspect and haven't quite gotten into the weeds on all of the details. But, that is one of the priorities, and a spending cap. That's why my very first committee in Judiciary, we heard the spending cap because that is a caucus priority saying we got to get control of the spending.
Yeah, we spoke with Will Stapp earlier this week, and I'm excited to see something like this go forward with both a statutory and a constitutional component, because we all know what happens if it's just a statutory thing, right? I mean, no
Correct.
offense to Sarah Vance and company, but the legislature really doesn't give a damn about your statute. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, really? That was just a speed bump for us. We'll just run right over that. Sarah, down to the last 3 or 4 minutes here before we got to go to break. And I know you've got to go during the break, so we'll be taking you in. So I want to give you the last 3 or 4 minutes here, just, for any final thoughts or things people should be watching for, words of encouragement for the because people are frustrated. We saw that in the last election. We saw afterwards what happened. There was a lot of frustration. There was a lot of distrust in what was going on. A lot of people just kind of threw their hands up in the air and was like, with the lowest voter turnout in state history on a per capita basis. So, final thoughts here as we let you go.
Well, I just want to say that we need you. We need your engagement. Tomorrow in House Judiciary, we are going to be hearing a resolution that asks Congress to to pass the Firearms Reciprocity Act. And I'm providing public testimony because we want your engagement. In order for us to be successful in the session, we need to hear from you. We need to hear your thoughts on the BSA. And that means when you call in, you send those emails and you testify, it really does get heard. And I can't emphasize that enough. I just want to answer some questions from the chat before I go. No, this is not Folgers.
Oh, not Folgers.
It's
Okay.
not Folgers. And no, we are not a binding caucus on the budget or anything else for that matter. You know that I'm going to keep my word. And I gave my word a long time ago that I will not be a part of a binding caucus. However, I am committed to governing. And that means that I'm going to do my very best to be able to say yes to a budget. And that means I have to contribute and be part of that conversation. But I'm not bound, and no other member should be as either. But I want to give it a go. Alaskans deserve commitment to do this well, and that's what I'm committed to.
Representative Sarah Vance is our guest. One final question, since I have a minute or two here. Biggest surprise since you've been down there this time? I mean, this is not your first rodeo. You've been down there 4 years, slugging it out in the minority, being treated like the redheaded stepchildren that you all are, I'm sure. But what's your biggest surprise coming in this year? And, maybe a pleasant surprise, I guess, pleasant or otherwise. But what's the biggest thing that you're just like, wow, give it to us.
I'm going to tell on myself, and I don't know, I'm probably going to get a lot of heat for it, but I'm now in a caucus with Bryce Edgman, and he's a pretty agreeable guy. The Bush Caucus has been really great to work with at this point. Like I said, we haven't gotten in the weeds on issues. There's clearly things that we don't agree with, but so far so good. And I think that is something that we need to consider, that we can work together on what we can find agreement about. And that, he gave the opportunity for the Republicans to govern. And I have to tip my hat to that.
Well, I mean, not to be cynical, but he did get something out of it, so it's okay. But I mean, I guess that's the art of compromise, right? Everybody gets a little something out of it when it's all said and done. But yeah, a little surprising if you'd told me 2 years ago that Bryce Edgman was going to come across the aisle and work with a Republican majority on that. It's definitely a surprising situation. All right, anything else, Sarah Vance, before I let you go?
Well, I just want to know, I miss everyone in my district. I appreciate you and love hearing from you. And hey, respect to all the plow guys out right now and those making our coffee.
And those making, if they can just make the coffee faster. That's all I'm asking for.
Keep it hot.
I'm out of beard curler, and it's like a national crisis around my house right now. It's a national crisis. All right, Sarah Vance, hold the line for just 1 second before we let you go. We'll give you a chance to sound off to the chat room. Folks, we got more coming up. We'll do one more segment, just me and you. And then at the top of the hour, Representative David Eastman is going to be joining us. We'll be talking with him about his staffing issues, which made a bit of a splash earlier this week. We will continue the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Your mental suppository. The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Well, somebody didn't believe a word you said. You are part of a binding caucus. You may not want to call it that, but you are. I mean, I was pretty much assured by everybody that I've spoken to, both on and off the air, that no, we're not a binding caucus. That we can decide however we want to decide. I don't know what else you could do to. That's the problem. Sometimes when people get bent on something like this, it's like it's how do you prove a negative? You can't show them until you get to the vote, and maybe Sarah votes against the budget just to show you she's not part of the binding caucus. I don't know. What is it? What is it? But there's nothing there's nothing holding you there. I think this was such a big issue. I mean, if you told me 6-7 years ago that because I've been railing against the binding caucus for years, but if you told me 6 years ago that was going to be a key campaign issue, I would have laughed in your face, because I'd be like, people don't even know what it is, let alone care about it. But it is a big deal now. I mean, it's pretty obvious that had to be part and parcel of the. I mean, that's why Rob Meyer didn't join the Republican majority in the Senate, because that was a binding, and he said, I can't do that. I voted. I actually went and got elected on one of those as a premise. So I'll give you one final bite at that apple before we go here, because again, I don't know if you're going to convince them, but there you go.
Well, I actually want to read the bills before I vote on them. That's one of the things that I do, is I read every bill that comes across my desk. And, I want to be able to vote my conscience, and I don't want to prevent any other legislator from doing that. Early on in negotiations for the majority, one member said, well, if I join you, then I don't want to bring up social bills. You can't introduce anything like that. And I said, well, no, that doesn't work for me. I'm not going to tell you what legislation you can or cannot introduce. So why would I want that? Why would I let you impose that on me?
Right.
If you want to introduce something that matters to you, that you have that right to do that, and you should for your district. And that was something that they were unexpected, that I was going to reply that way, that I would give them the same courtesy to introduce whatever they wanted. But that's been the mood here of, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, because it's too controversial. And yet there's all kinds of other things that are controversial, like BSA and defined benefits. I consider those controversial, right?
Red flag laws, gun laws, all this
Right.
reciprocity. I mean, those are controversial, I'm sure. No social. I love that. Somebody said, we're not going to do anything social. And next thing you know, I hear about all these social things that are going on over in the Senate, when they said, well, we're not going to do anything controversial socially. What? Okay. Yeah. So, all right, Sarah, really last final bite at the apple here for anything else, exhorting what can folks do? What can folks do? How can they help you? How can they help the majority? I keeps wanting to say minority. How can we help the majority in the House and the minority in the Senate? What can we do?
Well, one of the things we haven't talked about is the repeal of ranked choice voting. HB 1 is going to be the bill that we're moving by Rep Rauscher, and I co-sponsored that because it's essentially the same as mine. We need to hear from you. Send in those letters, send in those emails, because we have to make a lot of noise and get that as a priority moved along this session. And man, that is so important. If there's one thing that we do, repealing ranked choice voting to kind of get us back to one person, one vote, and we can't do that without you.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I think it's something that needs to go. And if nothing else, it at least needs to be discussed because, again, lowest voter turnout in history, a huge disenfranchisement of the rural population, up to 19% of 18% of votes rejected, and so many other things. It needs to be discussed. I mean, we were sold a bill of goods. And you can argue for ranked choice voting all along, but you cannot argue that it was sold as something completely different. That's, that's what the bottom line is. It was sold as a dark money bill funded by dark money, now allowing dark money to continue. So it definitely did not do what people thought it would do. And I think most Alaskans, if you polled them today, I think it would be repealed immediately, but that's a big lift. That's a big lift, and it's a big process.
But it's in the works. So you gotta participate. Tell your friends and neighbors, because I'm serious. We can't do it without you.
HB 1 is Rauscher's bill you've co-sponsored. Okay. And when is that coming up? Is that coming up anytime soon, or what's the?
You know what? I don't know when it has a hearing, but I encourage you to go on akleg.gov, alaskaleg.gov, and you can just type in the search bar HB 1, and it'll take you right to that bill. And you can follow along, see where it is, and, submit testimony.
See, you got a fresh start on the day. You're already awake. You didn't have to wait. You didn't have to try and wake up driving to your meeting. See, this is the benefit.
my pre-coffee coffee.
My pre-coffee coffee. That's the way to do it. All right, Sarah Vance, thank you so much for being part of it today. We appreciate it. We will see you soon. Thanks for coming on board.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks so much. All right, folks, here we go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Okay. Good stuff. During the break there, for those of you who weren't with us in the commercial break, Sarah said one of the things that we didn't get a chance to talk about is ranked choice voting. And that there is a bill right now in the House, HB 1, that is being put forward by George Rauscher. And Sarah says she has signed on to it. And I got to say, it's something that really, it's been talked about a little bit, but it hasn't been really focused on because we've been all sucked up in the whole BSA, discussion and the defined benefits discussion. But ranked choice voting is an important topic that we need to continue to discuss. I mean, again, this last election, the lowest voter turnout in pretty much state history. We had a huge number of votes that were pitched out and people being disenfranchised, especially from the villages, where it was nearly, 18%, something like that, of ballots were discarded. And, of course, this whole thing was built on the premise and sold to us on the premise of something that it wasn't. I mean, it was a ranked choice voting bill, but they sold it as a way to eliminate dark money. Of course, it was funded by $7 million in dark money, and we continue to have dark money. I mean, that's the problem here. Ranked choice voting needs to be addressed. Ranked choice voting needs to be addressed by the legislature, and if the legislature is unwilling to pick it up, then it should be repealed by the voters. And I know that there are some people out there who are working on that right now, getting ranked choice voting repealed. But it is something that needs to be addressed because otherwise we are going to be held up as some kind of shining light of, look how great it was in Alaska, when it wasn't that great, folks. Now, would some things have changed? Potentially, maybe. But the idea is, in the long term, is that we need to have one person, one vote. And if there needs to be a revote or a runoff, then we have another runoff. We have another election. We don't do this, where your vote gets counted multiple times, but my vote doesn't because there's not enough candidates I can support, or whatever the choice may be. Ranked choice voting needs to be addressed this year. So that's my thoughts on it. And there you go. Coming up in just a few minutes, we're going to be diving into it with David Eastman, who is going to be talking about the termination of one of his staffers earlier this week. He wrote a piece on his own blog here about this, and he is not he's not a happy man about it. He's not happy about it. So we're going to get the dope from him. There's been some contention that, he had some promises made, and then others have said, no, there was no promises made that this would happen and that would happen. So we're going to get both sides of the story. We want to figure out what's going on. We'll see what happens with that. So he's going to be with us in hour 2. Coming up on tomorrow's program. Ooh, baby. Tomorrow's going to be a full day as well. We're going to be joined in hour 1 by senior editor at Reason Magazine, Jacob Sullum. He's going to be here with us to talk about some of the latest federal judicial decisions, some from the federal courts. And there's been a handful of them. I don't know if you've been watching this for firearms news and firearms rights, but there was a decision that people who had been accused of domestic violence, or even the Lautenberg Amendment. I don't know if you know what the Lautenberg Amendment is, but basically, if a couple gets into a verbal altercation, no, I'm not talking about people beating on each other or doing it. I'm just saying they can get in a verbal altercation, and if one of the spouses says, "Well, I felt threatened," and there's some kind of misdemeanor domestic violence something filed, well, you lose your gun rights through the Lautenberg Amendment, and other things. Well, now a court has said that you can't lose your gun rights for those kind of things. A court has also stated that you can't be denied your Second Amendment rights if you are a recreational or medical marijuana user. That's also and this all falls back to Brune. This all keeps coming back to the Brune decision. And it is the gift that just keeps on giving right now, folks. So Jacob Sullum's going to come on and talk with us about some of these latest federal decisions. And that includes the decision on the bump stock ban, where the federal court says, ATF, you've overstepped your authority. You don't have the authority to do that by caveat. I think it's the same thing that's going to happen. You're going to have exactly the same decision on the arm brace ban, which is going on right now, the new rules that they're trying to go out there and profligate about the arm braces and everything else. So Jacob Sullum's going to come in and talk about that. In hour 2, it will be Chris Chang, Top Shot Champion Season 4. We will talk with him as well about some of those decisions, about how it's affecting things down in California. We'll also talk with him about some of the shootings and things that have happened down there in the place that's supposed to be the safest in the nation, right? I mean, that's the logic that people are using when they say, well, if we just had the strictest gun laws, none of this would ever happen. And of course, we know for a fact that that's not what happens, because criminals, by their very definition, break the law. It is what it is. That's how it works. So we'll talk with Chris Chang about that as well. And then we will be joined by Willie Waffle from wafflemovies.com for the weekend movie and entertainment review. So busy time coming up tomorrow on Firearms Friday. And then Monday, it's going to be Sarah Montalbano, and we're going to have Dr. Chad Savage on to talk about medical choice as well. Also, I've gotten I got a couple emails from people over the last 2 or 3 days saying thank you for having Mark Cameron on, the author, that they really enjoyed that segment and they hope that I did more of them. And I hope I do more of them as well. I'm excited to talk about that and to have different kind of guests on for different things. That's what we're working on right now. So we're gonna be moving in that direction as well. So, man, it's almost Friday. I can taste it from here. I can almost Friday, almost ready to go. And it's going to be a great weekend. Well, I mean, it was nice to talk to Sarah, and I'm glad to see that the former minority, now majority, a Republican majority, is taking seriously their move to try and help fulfill the mandate to govern and do it properly. I'm glad to see that the Fiscal Policy Working Group's plan is being held up and utilized as a yardstick for creating some kind of long-term fiscal plan. We need that. We need a long-term fiscal plan in this state. That's what we've been lacking for the last 25 or 30 years. Quite honestly, really, we've never had a long-term fiscal plan in this state. But the Fiscal Policy Working Group has the support, a bipartisan support of some of the most extremes on the left and right in the legislature. Why aren't we putting this out there? Why aren't we looking at that? Well, now they are, finally. And I'm glad to see it. Maybe we will eventually come up with a long-term fiscal plan in this state. That would be a good thing. All right, we got more coming up. Ahead, David Eastman, our guest, The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio. Kevin says, did you know, this is a big block of text here. Yep. Did you know that the Montana House has 100 reps and they have a single staffer for each caucus? I had a single staffer in Juneau for both of the last 2 years. The whole premise that every legislature is due 2 staffers is a huge bunch of crap and a waste of money. New Hampshire House does not even have offices. Their offices are their desks on the floor. This is not about staff. This is about control and power. There were no promises made. Tilton is an open book, I'm assuming is what, because it's cut off. I can't see the end of it. I'm assuming he's saying Tilton is an open book on it. And we'll get her take on this. I know that there's been some contention about this, and I know things can be wrapped around. So it'll be it. Long-term, the idea of a long-term fiscal plan is a fantasy. Okay. I mean, just because it's a fantasy doesn't mean that we shouldn't be trying to attain it. I mean, I'm trying to attain sainthood. I know I'll never get there, but I'm trying to live my life to a certain standard, right? I'm still trying to do it. Defined benefits. Nope, wrong one. Where was the other one? There we go. Defined benefit plans are a fiscal black hole. There'll be 11 people on the House Finance. 6 of the people who voted for the defined benefits plan last year are on House Finance now due to the makeup of the new House Majority Bipartisan Caucus, with Mike Cronk being one of them. So we should be in the minority is what you're saying, James. Is that what you're saying? We should be in the minority, or this is a done deal? I'm not sure it's a done deal, quite honestly. I mean, I don't think that that the defined benefits plan is a done deal. I think there may be some, public support for certain parts of it, but at some point somebody's going to go, in the back rooms or in the dead of night as they're sitting there laying in their bed, they're thinking, this is going to bankrupt us. Because the money, I mean, there's a reason why there was no fiscal note attached to the to that bill that went through CRNA. There's a reason why, because I think it very clearly shows that it's going to be I think it very clearly shows that it's going to it's too costly, way too costly. So we'll see. When would you like me to call in? I really need to tell you about the crap that's going on with the Durham buses and the Matsu. I'm not going to have any time today, Melody, I don't believe. Maybe the last segment, we'll see how much time we have with Representative Eastman, whether or not he is going to be able to stick with us for the whole hour or whether we have enough to talk about for the whole hour. I'm sure we do. We could talk about it. But we'll see, Melody. If we have an open line at the end of the segment, or open segment at the end of the show, rather, then we could do an open line thing and we can talk about that. Last night's Ways to Be Meaningful Committee, the Ways and Means Committee, had a great presentation from the State Department of Labor. Worth watching the video if you have not seen it. What was the topic of the video, Kevin? Was it defined benefits or was it something else? Just interesting. Interesting to know. Ask Eastman why he introduced 9 amendments, wasted legal's time on our money, or amendments that he would not go anywhere. Where's the Irish Affairs Committee? Because the tribal affairs, nothing to, I don't know. I can't even this morning. I just can't even. I could call in next week if that is better. I see you have a packed schedule this week. I mean, my next opening is Wednesday of next week. Wednesday of next week in the morning would be my first opening if I don't hear back from somebody I've already invited. But I mean, yeah, potentially next Wednesday. How about that, Melody? Potentially next Wednesday at 6:24 a.m. We'll just book it right here on the air. How does that work? You've been watching what's going on in Anchorage. My God, that is a train wreck. Now they've got an attorney group. The Anchorage Assembly is now asked the courts to subpoena the administration records. The mayor was asked last night Tuesday night if he seriously considered resigning. The ADN has got an article and a piece up that was kind of an investigation. The headline reads, "It was good to be friends with Anchorage's mayor." Then the investigations began with a follow-up story From penis cookies to spying. I mean, that's something I never thought I would read on the air. From penis cookies to spying, a growing list of allegations at Anchorage City Hall. I mean, it's wow. I am just so glad that I do not live in Anchorage right now, because it is a hot mess down there, Maybe an app for booking on Dukes. I actually considered that, like a Calendarly type app for that, but I don't know. I like the personal touch. Doesn't always work 100%, but I like it, Penis cookies are for bachelorette. What have we become? All right. We're getting ready to come on down and talk about this. And Laura wants to talk about the other thing. Okay. Well, we're all good. Let's continue. I guess that puts that to bed. Let's go over here. I'm going to jump back into it. I see Representative Eastman's in the green room, and we're ready to go. We will be back with more of the Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. You haven't gone where?
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
To me.
What could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
Just
a Michael Dukes Show, streaming live
across the world on the interwebs at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. It is the Michael Duke Show. Good morning, and how are ya? It is Thursday, one more day till Firearms Friday, and we are continuing with our show today. Big full schedule. Just finished up with Representative Sarah Vance in hour one. Some good discussions there on things that are going on down in the legislature, getting her take on it. We're just about to be joined by Representative David Eastman, who is in the green room right now, ready to go to talk about some of the issues that he has concerns about, including the loss of a staffer from earlier this week. He's written about that over at his website, davideastman.org. There's a post up there with the story, and we're going to talk about that this morning. Just a reminder, if you want to join us today in another way rather than regular old terrestrial radio, which there's nothing wrong with that. Radio is good. It's free. It's been there forever, and we will continue to be here. But if you'd like a little more interaction, you can join us over in the chat room. We're live now, just me and you and 70-something plus of our closest friends are over on Facebook and YouTube right now. Just go to facebook.com/Michael Duke Show if you'd like to jump on board with Facebook, or youtube.com/Michael Duke Show if you'd like to get in on YouTube. So feel free to come on in and join us. We'll have conversations and discussions there as well. Get things started, shall we, for this morning? And we're going to talk with Representative David Eastman, and we will get his take on everything that's going on down in the legislature and talk about his article from earlier this week. We welcome him to the program now. Good morning, Representative. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. Well, we are enjoying the snow rather than the rain now. It was a couple weeks of rain. Now it's a couple weeks of snow.
All right. Well, that's, we got to always mix it up. That's the thing. We got to keep it interesting, keep it exciting down there, so that you guys have something else to do and talk about. Representative, I want to talk first things first. I do want to get into some other things about the session and some of the big hot button issues. But first and foremost, I want to talk about this article that you wrote on your website earlier this week that says, if you like your staff, you can keep your staff, with a subtitle, Political Extortion in the Alaska Legislature. And you have lost one of your staffers. Pam Good was let go, something that's not necessarily in the control of the legislators who they work for. Staffers are always, I think, at the whim and vagaries of leadership, and they're kind of always on eggshells trying to figure out if they're going to come back or not. So you assert that this is I don't know, punitive or broken promises. There's a lot of things going on in this article. Why don't you just wind it down for us here and give us the full story from your perspective, and let's discuss that. So we can start off here.
Sure. Well, yeah, a lot going on, and it has to do with things like caucuses and whether they're binding, and whether or not you punish people for casting a vote that they said they wouldn't cast, or now, this year we've taken the turn, I think for the very first time, instead of waiting for you to vote against the budget and then punishing you and making you lose your staff and committees, whatnot, they decided to ratchet it up one more and simply kick you off the committees and take away your staff, fire your staff, just because you haven't promised to vote for the budget, to begin with. So here we are. 2023, hooray! The details of Pam's firing are straightforward enough. Legislative policy is that a legislator selects our own staff, and that's written in our legislative employee handbook. That's the way it's worked for forever, as far as I know. And they decided they were going to not follow that policy in my case, and they were going to literally tell me which of my staff was being fired. Now when called on the carpet, they're saying, "Oh no, we never actually, told you which of your staff's being fired." Of course, we still have the email that they sent Pam saying you're fired. Certainly didn't consult me in that process as far as which of my staff was my prerogative to keep. So yes, Monday was her day to turn in her keys and buy a plane ticket to go home and that sort of thing. Always difficult to lose staff, especially in the middle of a session when you're trying to field phone calls from constituents and all of the different things that you're working on in the chaos of session in Juneau. So that is a loss to my district and my constituents, of course. We wish that hadn't happened. But at the same time, the price that's being asked is too much. And right now that is, voting for appropriations that are, targeted to exceed $14 billion this year. I was not willing to make that commitment, certainly not without knowing what's in those $14 billion. And that is too much for, some of my fellow legislators who are hard over on the only way to run a legislature is through a binding caucus, and they cannot conceive or even imagine any other way of doing business.
So your assertion is that you were asked for your vote on the budget before or as the caucus was forming, because we've been told time and again, including by just recently, 20 minutes ago, Representative Sarah Vance, that there is no binding caucus. She did not have to guarantee her vote on any bills, budget or otherwise. We've heard that from other legislators as well. But you're asserting that you were asked for your vote on the budget. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, every interaction that I've had with members of the majority on that topic for the last year has always been to the same point. If you want to be part of the majority, you need to be willing to sign on to the budget. And then I, inevitably ask, well, and what's in the budget? And they say, well, we'll figure it out. Trust the process. It'll be chosen by, other good legislators in the caucus, and the majority will, whatever. The form that the binding caucus takes each year is sometimes a little bit different, but the essentials are still, exactly the same as far as the expectation that you will help them pass the budget. And isn't it nice and reasonable when somebody comes to you and says, well, gee, will you just help us pass the budget? And it's like, okay, well, fine. Well, let's figure out what's in the budget. Well, we need to make sure to pass the budget. And of course, the organization, it does not come together based on an agreement on policy. I mean, look at who are the members of the caucus right now? You've got Bryce Edgman on one side. You got George Rauscher on the other side. You got a lot of other folks. What policies do Bryce Edgman and George Rauscher actually agree on? That the list is very, 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 very small. And so when you have people on polar opposites of philosophy and ideology and party coming together because the mantra is we have to be in the majority. It doesn't matter how we get there. We have to be in the majority, because if we're in the minority again, we can't get anything done. Unfortunately, if that's how you start the negotiation, the Democrats are going to walk all over you, and they did. They took control of the House Finance Committee. And so right now you have a supposedly Republican majority that, again, is controlled in large part by Democrats, because they bought into this idea that we need to be in the majority. We need to have a committee chairmanship behind our name. And if we don't have that, then we don't matter. And if you buy into that, then they've got you. There's no way that you can get around, how should I say, changing the fundamentals of how Juneau operates, if that's your position.
So, I mean, in the past, this is really kind of a historical return to what has happened in the past, because in the past, there's been Republican majorities that were made up of Republicans with the Bush caucus. The Bush caucus historically for about a dozen years, 15 years, 20 years, was part of that Republican caucus for many years. This is kind of a return to that. But your assertion is that we should be not working with anybody at all that doesn't have an R behind their name. Is that kind of where you stand, that it's an absolutism kind of thing where it has to be nothing but Republicans, and if we can't get that, then we're in the minority, and that's okay?
No, not at all. That's the talking point coming from the majority. That's never been my position. I've certainly never taken that position. Now, the difference between what's happened in the past and what's happened, this year is actually significant, because in the past, you had a Republican majority. They formed a majority. They had enough votes to elect a speaker and organize the House. And then after that, for reasons that made sense to them, usually trying to get, closer to 27 votes and 2/3 majority and so forth, they would invite, Bush Democrats like Bryce Edgman to be part of that caucus. This year is entirely different, because they didn't have the 21 votes. They didn't have enough votes to elect a speaker. Frankly, they told, me one thing, and then did the exact opposite when they invited Bryce Edgman and CJ and Josiah and Neil into the caucus. Those four gave them the majority. Those four can take away that majority on the turn of a dime. As soon as Bryce Edgman is no longer getting what Bryce Edgman demands, then they have no majority. They have no vote to keep their speaker. They're toast, and they realize it. And more important, Bryce realizes it.
So, not to play Monday morning quarterback here, but so what should, in your opinion, what should have been done instead? Should they just been relegated to the minority and let the other coalition form again as it did before, and then try and work from the cheap seat, so to speak, and try and get things done from there? Would that have been a better outcome in your mind?
No, not at all. No, I don't think that's what you work for. It's certainly not what you plan for. If you have a majority forming for power alone, and not based on policy goals, and not based on party philosophy and so forth, that is become normal in Juneau for many, many years. It was normal when Republicans were in the speaker position. It's normal when Democrats were in the speaker position. That's all that most. Yeah, at this point, that's all that any member of the House knows, because that's what they've experienced, and they've never seen anything different. Now, to try and put together a majority based on policy, based on trying to achieve particular goals and so forth, that is the way that it takes place in 49 other states, with very, very few exceptions. Alaska is unique in going a different route. And I know Pennsylvania is a little bit of an exception this year too. So, there are some occasional exceptions, but what happened in Pennsylvania is completely new for Pennsylvania, whereas what happened in Alaska is not new. It happens every year in Alaska.
What you're talking about is the automatic majority minority thing. So if it doesn't matter that if 21 Republicans got elected and 19 Democrats, then it would automatically be a Republican majority, regardless of whether one of the Republicans was more moderate than anything else, because that's how the majority of the states form. That's how the Congress does it. That's how everything else does it, right? Is that what you're?
It is, and that's based fundamentally on a respect for the will of the people, as expressed at the ballot box in November, and that should be the case in Alaska as well. But Juneau being 600 miles from most people in Alaska or more, that respect is no longer there, and hasn't been there for quite some time. And that's why you got lots of examples of that. When the governor calls a special session in Wasilla, and the legislature tries to say no and tries to get the votes to stay in Juneau, and doesn't get the constitutionally required number of votes, but decides, well, heck, we're just going to stay in Juneau anyways. I mean, that's the mentality. It was in 2019 when that happened. It's still, the same mentality today, not having respect for the will of the people. And of course, that is expressed in not having, respect for legislators that the people elected don't, aren't part of your agenda, whatever that happens to be. So, in other states, you got Republicans and Democrats that may, hate each other, philosophically, and agree on nothing. But in most states, you do still have that baseline respect for the people, which means, hey, okay, we're gonna work with each other, and it's gonna be what it's gonna be, and we're not going to try and tell the people, gosh, you really voted for the wrong person, so I'm going to spend the next 2 years making sure you voted for the wrong person, like they've done with my district. And that there's obviously a lot of other things that flow from that lack of respect. I mean, really, it's contempt for who people choose at an election, and it's contempt for people like Laura Reinbold, and it's contempt for myself. Obviously, I'm not the only one, but right now, I'm the one here. I'm the one who's having my staff fired and so forth. And we need to do better. 49 other states show us that it can be done, but Juneau is in a pit, and some people think that gosh, once we fix the binding caucus, everything will be peaches and rainbows. I don't believe that's the case, but I do look at what happened in the Senate. My senator joined the binding caucus. Of course, you hear some of the same talking points that you hear from people like Sarah Vance. Oh no, it's not a binding caucus. It's this not binding caucus per se thing. Whereas you talk to folks like Rob Meyer, he said, hey, it's a binding caucus. I wouldn't join it because it was a binding caucus. Everybody knows it's a binding caucus, but my senator, is going to say, no, they're all wrong when they say in press conferences that it's a binding caucus, because, we really don't have any rule that you have to vote any particular way. It's kind of an expectation. And it's more of a guideline, really. I mean, look, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And the idea that we're all going to intend to vote for the budget. Well, what does that mean? Well, we're all going to intend to vote for the budget. Okay. And there's 23 of us, so not all of us need to vote for the budget for it to pass, but we all need to be committed to it passing. So, at some point, we're going to count noses, and you need to make sure we have at least 21 votes to pass the budget on the first time. And if we got 21, then, maybe you and one other person doesn't have to vote for the budget. Oh, okay. Does that make it less binding? No. There's still a commitment that they're going to pass the budget on the first time, no matter what's in it. And that's a bridge too far for my district.
Representative David Eastman, our guest, The Michael Duke Show. We'll continue with him here in just a moment. Your home for Common Sense Radio.
Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
All right, we were running up against the break there. Representative Eastman, I guess my question is this. We're going to have to work across the aisle at some point because we do have this broken system. And I agree with you. I think that we should be doing what other states do, which is basically the majority is set when the election is certified. period. I think that should be the way that things are done. And if you've got people in the majority like a Louise Stutz or somebody who doesn't necessarily agree, then they can work across the aisle with other people, in certain areas. But they're still going to vote the way that they're going to vote. But so, I mean, I guess my thought here is that you're going to have to work with somebody at some point. You're right, we didn't have 21. We didn't have the full 21 to be able to vote the speakership. And in the past, it has been a stronger majority where the Bush caucus was added after they had their majority to begin with. But at this point, if sitting in the minority and not being able to control the narrative, control the flow of bills into the different committees and things like that, basically means that, we're barely a blocking force. We're spinning the wheels more than anything else. Then maybe this is the solution of finding people that you can work with and find, because there's a question of, to me, it's not necessarily Republican or Democrat. It's not necessarily elephant or donkey or even left or right. To me, it's bigger government versus smaller government. Who supports on specific issues specifically? Does that come into play for you, or does it have to be somebody who aligns with you ideologically 100%? Or could you find a caucus that you could work with that says, we're going to find a fiscal plan and we're going to solve the PFD crisis. All these other issues that we may not agree on are to the curb, but we're going to come together as a coalition or a caucus on these one or two issues. Could you support that?
Yeah, so that's one of the talking points that some of the majority have been using.
That's not a talking point, Representative. That's my question, because that's how I feel. That's how I feel about it. I'm curious.
Came up with it first, and they're just parroting it. I don't know who came up with that first, but the idea. I mean, look at what happened in the House, and look at what happened in the Senate. What happened this year is not what you just described. What happened is you literally had 8 Republican senators and 19 Republican House reps basically tell the voters through their actions, you know what, you elected some Republicans. They are not the kind of Republicans we want to work with, so we're not going to. They are, whatever's wrong with them. In the end, you find that the 4 most conservative legislators in the House and Senate, 3 in the Senate and 1 in the House, myself, if you look at, their rankings on their voting record from non-Alaskan groups like the Conservative Union and others that rank all the legislators, somehow magically, all the most disagreeable legislators that you just can't work with because you don't like them, you can't trust them, they're party poopers, what have you, all end up being the most conservative legislators. And so you say, all right, we're not going to work with that crew because we don't like what they're about. And we are going to literally replace them with Democrats. That's what they did in the Senate. That's what they've done in the House. And in all cases, it wasn't the Mike Showers and Rob Myers and Shelley Hughes and David Eastman of the world saying, oh, gee, those Democrats are just too hard to work with. We're not willing to work with them. Oh, those Republicans, they're just, they're rhinos. We just couldn't possibly, caucus with them. No, literally all 4 of us were kicked to the curb. Rob Myers was invited to be part of it. He said, hey, can't do it, binding caucus. And he was kicked to the curb as well. Whereas Shelley and Mike and I were excluded from the get-go. Every time we tried to be part of that conversation, we were told not only no, but hell no in different ways. And that is not what you were just, describing a minute ago. You're describing, being able to, work together, different parties and so forth. Everything that I've seen from Mike and Shelley has been that they are willing and glad to do that. Despite whatever disagreements there are. I certainly have been as well. And what happened in my case, I was literally told on Tuesday.
Hold on, Representative. We got to return. Here we go. The Michael Dukes Show. Nope, this one right here. Here we go. I mean it for real this time. Sorry, 3 seconds.
The Michael Dukes Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes, the one with the show.
The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio, continuing now. Representative David Eastman is our guest. We have been talking during the break about the different breakdown of the legislature and who can work across the aisle with who, and what is the perfect, I guess, kind of what is the perfect majority or perfect coalition. Right before we came back, Representative Eastman was breaking down for us what went down earlier this week and promises that were made, things that were done. So, Representative, I'll let you set the stage again and continue your thought on that.
Yeah, you had mentioned before the break, wouldn't it be, necessary at times to, work across the aisle and, bring Democrats into the caucus and so forth. And and there are circumstances where that might absolutely be necessary. But what you saw in this case was something totally different from that. You literally saw Republicans say, "Hey, we refuse to work with those, crazy conservatives." In the past, it's been Laura Reinbold. This year, it's Mike Shower, my former senator, Shelley Hughes, my former House rep, myself, Rob Myers. We've all been, shown to the door. And in Rob's case, he was offered, membership in the caucus, and he said, no, it's a binding caucus. I can't do that, or my district isn't going to go there. And he was, kicked to the curb as well. It wasn't an unwillingness on Mike or Shelley or Rob and I to work with other legislators we disagree with. It was literally those legislators saying, we in various ways we hold those legislators in contempt. We hold their constituents in contempt, such to the point where we refuse to work with them. And there is no conversation, and we're going to literally punish you, and we are going to literally say publicly that you need to fix yourself. You need to change your policy, the way you make your decisions to the legislator and so forth. And then we will revisit this after you've experienced your punishment, and once you've reformed yourself, well, then maybe we'll think about treating you like a fellow legislator. That's what's coming out of the Senate. That's what I'm seeing in the House. It's very much two peas in the same pod there. The difference in the House is that there's more Republicans than Democrats in the caucus. The difference in the Senate is there's one more Democrat than Republicans. But if Rob had joined, it would have been 50-50. So it's not about the numbers. It's about, all right, how are they making their decisions? What's their agenda? How did that agenda come together? And that agenda in the House and the Senate comes together after you decide on the outset, we're going to ignore the fact that Republicans elected David Eastman, and we are just going to pretend like that district isn't Republican, doesn't exist. And we're going to tell ourselves lots of things based on that assumption, and that's how you get to where you are. So what happened was, once we're getting ready to be sworn in, I was visited, or was called to the Speaker's office, and she asked if I was going to vote for her. She asked me for my vote. We had a conversation about that, and at the we talked about, all right, what's the agenda going to be? She said, well, we haven't really figured that out yet, and okay, well, that's an issue. And when can I be part of the conversation about organizing the House? And well, we're going to deal with that after we vote for Speaker. That's going to be a separate process this year. It's not the traditional process. We're going to wait until after do that. Okay, fine. So next day we had the vote for Speaker. Of course, I voted for Kathy Tilton, the Republican, and as did many others. And then as I am literally walking out the doors from, the floor session, a reporter tells me, hey, they you aren't going to be in the majority. Sorry, what do you feel about that, basically? It's like, okay, well, that's exactly the opposite of what the Speaker of the House literally told me 24 hours ago. How's that happen? And then, I think it took 2 weeks for Kathy to apologize for how that went down. But that is literally how Republicans are treating fellow Republicans, whether it was Louise Stutz, whether it was myself, whether it was Rob Myers, Mike Shower, Shelley Hughes. This is the way that Juneau operates when you don't go along with Juneau's agenda. And you can leave it very high level like that this year. Juneau wants to spend a lot of money, and they really don't need conservatives telling them that's a bad idea. And so they've decided that they don't really need to include conservatives in that conversation, and they've decided not to. And that's a decision. I think the public should have some input in that. But again, the whole binding caucus principle, if you will, is whether it's intentional or not. I think it's fairly intentional. Is to exclude the public from that conversation. It's to say, hey, there's 23 of us. We can figure out the budget better than anybody else. The new talking point is, well, if it's anybody else other than the 23 of us, then it's going to be higher. Well, I don't know that would be the case at all. I probably, if it was my vote in there, it'd probably be lower because that's where my district wants to go. But the talking point is, well, it's got to be the 23 of us. The best budget possible is going to happen from the 23 of us, and that excludes the public from that conversation. The way that it's been laid out is a clear violation of the open meetings guidelines and statute. You are never supposed to have a majority of a legislative body get together in a room and hash out all the differences of what's in the budget without the public, being part of that. And usually the only way that happens legally is you do it on the House floor when the televised, cameras are running and the people can see what their, representatives are doing. We don't own the process. It's the people's process. And we should follow the rules in place to make sure that they have their input in that process. And the whole binding caucus idea is no, that's a bad idea.
Well, I mean, you'd be right, except for the fact that the open meetings law is the legislature exempted themselves from the open meetings law. That's how these caucuses have worked, and that's how these closed doors meetings have gone on for years in Juneau.
No, I didn't say the Open Meetings Act. The Open Meetings Act is separate from the legislature. I said the Open Meetings Guidelines, and those fall within the Ethics Act, which does apply, to legislators. In fact, exclusively to legislators and legislative employees. And those guidelines specifically forbid a majority of a body, any legislative body, from getting together to discuss, what is actually going to be in the bill, what the policy is going to be. The plan right now, it's been explained to me by multiple legislators, is they're all going to come into a room after it comes out of House Finance Committee, and they're going to take the operating budget and they're going to figure out what's in it. And then after, they hash it out, then they're going to have some, unanimous agreement on making sure that it passes. And that's all well and good, except for that it literally is illegal.
Well, except I guess this is the first time I'm hearing about the guidelines because this has been going on for years. This is not a big surprise. You said you were given, according to your article, you were given an ironclad commitment from the speaker that if you like your staff, you could keep your staff. Which is later on somebody else has asserted, a couple other people have said that's not exactly how it went down. So give it to us from your perspective. When you say you received an ironclad commitment that you could keep your staff, walk us through that.
Yeah. So that conversation started when they wanted me to sign the Sense of the House on Tuesday, January 17th. And this is after we were sworn in. Of course, if there's no speaker, if there's no House organization, there's no one to approve the hiring of legislative staff. And so literally every legislative staff was, going to be fired immediately unless you have a unanimous agreement of all 40 legislators to, basically stand in the place of a speaker and rules chair and so forth. And when there's unanimous agreement, then, the staff can continue to be employed. And there were 4 legislators that were to be put on a committee to make staffing decisions in the absence of a speaker and a rules chair. And they came to me. There was 2 members from the majority, I think 2 members from the minority that were on that committee. They came to me for my signature, and I pointed out, I'm not in either caucus. None of these 4 people represents me or my interests or my district or my staff's interest. I think it's only fair that I be added to the committee as well, and it'd be 5 instead of 4. And it was back and forth, and they said, I didn't really like that idea. And so I pressed them and said, all right, well, if nobody's there to advocate for, me and my staff, will that be something that you're prepared to do? Are you prepared to make the commitment to go to bat for my staff and ensure that they're not targeted? And I was told by Kathy, when has anyone ever, gone after your staff, Dave? This is such, a ridiculous thought. And I pressed it. And before I signed that document, I received a explicit commitment from the speaker that my staff would not be touched. And her words were, unless they commit felonies. And that was a conversation that, I had with Kathy and another legislator. And we all were there. There weren't any questions about what happened. I signed the document. And now, I'm being told that commitment is not going to be honored.
So
but I'm glad. Go ahead.
No, I see. So, and when you say the speaker, was it as Luis Tooth was speaker, or was it Kathy Tilton as speaker? Who were you?
This is before there's a speaker, because you wouldn't need a sense of the House agreement if there was already a speaker. This is on Tuesday. We didn't elect a speaker until Wednesday. So Tuesday, I got the commitment, and by Thursday, I'd already received the memo had already been written saying that hey, sucks to be you, but your staffer's getting fired, basically.
And were you given, you receive like a certain number of points, right? I mean, each legislator gets a certain number of points to be able to hire staff and do all that kind of stuff. You were not given a choice to say, here's how many points you have, and you get to choose which staffer to keep. You're asserting that they just said, nope, this is the one that's got to go.
Correct. I got that in an email from Craig Johnson. So the points, historically, certainly for the last 6 years, whether you're in the minority, whether you're in the majority, whether you're like Sarah Rasmussen or Gabrielle Ledoux or myself at times, anyone who hasn't been, in one of the caucuses has still been entitled to the same office staff to run the basic office operations on behalf of your district. 2 staffers during a session, 1 staffer out of session. And now we have a new policy. And that new policy is if you don't join our club, then we're going to whack you and we're going to cut your staff. And now suddenly you're in the middle of session. You have 1 staff, which is less than all of the Democrats in the minority. And you're supposed to, somehow make that work. But again, that's not just about me. That's about anyone who wants to leave the majority over the next 2 years. And now they're holding that sword over their head saying, if you leave our club, we're going to whack you and make your job as a legislator difficult, if not impossible.
We're going to continue with David Eastman here. Our guest, the Michael Duke Show continues. One final segment dead ahead. You're on for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
We're in the break right now. Representative David Eastman is our guest. Representative, were you trying to hold out and be like that second? You mentioned Rasmussen and when they were kind of like the isolated island minorities of themselves. Is that what you were trying to hold out for? Was to be a minority kind of yourself? No.
In Sarah's case, Sarah decided for reasons that made sense to her that she wanted to leave the Republican caucus. I've never left the Republican caucus. In fact, of the 21 of us that have elected, you've had 20 other Republicans that have left the Republican caucus. In the Senate, you had 8 other Republicans that left the Republican caucus. So now you literally have 3 Republicans in a Republican super minority in the Senate. You've got myself in a super minority in the House.
You're saying Republicans left the caucus. You're talking about the current group that's down there in Juneau right now. You're saying they've left the caucus. They're the majority of Republicans, but they've left the caucus and you're the only one standing in it? I don't understand.
Yeah, they don't call themselves the House Republican caucus. They call themselves the House majority. And that's because it's not a Republican majority and it's not the Republican caucus. And as soon as they decided they were going to, bring Democrats in the caucus, they created a new organization. And it wasn't that, Rob or Shelley or Mike said, hey, we don't want to be Republican anymore. We don't want to be in caucus anymore. They were literally not told anything and told that the other folks had gone and formed their own caucus.
Right. But I mean, again, we're talking, I understand the Senate's a hot mess, and I'm not debating that. I'm talking specifically about the House. So you're standing on the outside, and the 17 or 18 other Republicans, they all left the caucus, but you're still standing strong. Is that your assertion?
Yeah, there were 19 others that left initially, and it was just Louise and I. We literally were the Republican caucus of two. We put out who we wanted to take photographs for us and that sort of thing. Anyways, it is now, I am literally the only one who has not left the Republican caucus, and that may seem like semantics, and of course it partly is, but from the standpoint of, all right, who's willing to work with other Republicans and who's willing to respect the will of the voters. Well, you've got 19 folks that have said they're really not. Louise was, certainly I have not gotten that, vibe from her in any of our interactions. She's gone on to join the minority. They call themselves a tripartisan minority because they've got, independents and Republicans and Democrats. I didn't, ask to be the only, member of the Republican caucus, which is kind of a silly thing when you think about it. But at the end of the day, it's very much like Hawaii. And honestly, it's much more honest with the public about where we're at in Juneau. You had a problem in November in Hawaii because when I was first elected, there was only one Republican in the Hawaii Senate, and then they elected two in November, and suddenly they had a power struggle over who was going to be the minority leader, and they couldn't figure it out. So made the papers, that sort of thing. Well, I suppose if it kept on being Louise and I, we'd have to figure that out. But now it's just down to me. So I'm minority leader by default. Hooray!
But I guess minority leader as a third minority, because there's already a minority of Democrats, right? I mean, so.
Yes.
I mean, again, and you have to have, I think the rules say something like that has to be 4 or 5 people to be a technical minority. Is that right?
Yeah. In order for, the majority to be forced to recognize you as a caucus, you need the 25%. And so obviously, Mike and Shelley and Rob don't have that. They would need 2 more to meet that 25 requirement. But there is nothing prohibiting those 17 in the majority from recognizing the minority's voice and recognizing their minority status. They should. There does need to be a minority in the Senate. Right now, there's no minority. All you have is the majority. And that maybe sounds great if you're in the majority, but as far as the process goes, you now have denied the minority the ability to have their voice heard.
Again,
you've denied them staff, you've denied them you've denied them representation on committees. Yeah. So you've got all these committees and you got no minority voice. And that's fundamentally not the way our system was designed.
Yeah, no, and in the Senate, I agree with that at this point, because again, that's not the way it is. But in the House, we do have a minority that has, 18 members, whatever it is now, 17, 18 members. We do have a minority, and then you. So again, that's that's my question. I got less than 60 seconds, so I'm not going to ask this question until we get back on the air. But I do have some more questions about the ideology of being able to work with other people and things like that. So hold the line for just a second, Representative. We're going to be right back to you. Folks, if you like the show, you'll want to hear what the show has to say. Feel free to like and share this broadcast on Facebook or on YouTube. Make sure you like and follow on Facebook. And again, out on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe and then hit the subscribe button again to ring the bell to get all notifications. That's what it takes to get the job done. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Continuing now, Representative David Eastman is our guest. We're going to take him up right to the top of the hour here. We were just talking during the break, and something you said, Representative, again, struck a chord with me, again, that you mentioned it, that these Republicans brought these Democrats into the fold, and that's why, you know, that's the wrongness of it. That you assert essentially that the Republicans, that the 18 Republicans in the House have left you, and that you are the only true Republican caucus left. But then part of it was because, again, bringing those Democrats in. And I guess my question is this. This goes back to my ideology of saying I want certain things in the state to be fixed. For example, long-term fiscal plan, the PFD, things like this. Sometimes we have to work across the aisle with people that we may disagree with on other points or other philosophies or other issues. But you've come back to that several times to say, you know, Republicans, they chose these Democrats to do that. That's how we have to work sometimes, right? I mean, sometimes otherwise we're basically in this gridlock where nothing happens and nothing gets fixed, or maybe it moves in the other direction because we don't have enough power as a minority to stop it. I mean, shouldn't we be open to doing that, working with other people, bringing people into the caucus?
Yeah, so, you know, as of Friday morning last week, it was Louise Stutz and myself who were the only members still in the Republican caucus and hadn't joined the majority caucus, hadn't joined the minority caucus, so forth. And that wasn't because, you know, we chose that the voters chose that, just like the voters, you know, elected a Republican majority. The idea that, you know, you might have to, you know, bring Democrats into leadership positions is not something that, you know, my you know, district particularly likes. In fact, in the bylaws of the Republican Party until very recently, if you did that, if you brought Democrats into leadership positions in either the House or the Senate after a majority of Republican legislators been elected, that was the worst thing possible. That was, you know, you're going to be sanctioned, you're going to be censured, you know, you're going to have the Republican Party, you know, find, you know, somebody to run against you in the next election, that kind of stuff. And now that language has since been removed. But it's still, you know, not something that most Republican voters, you know, want you to do. You know, are there situations where you just don't have any other choices? Yeah, there could be, especially, you know, if you're in a situation where a Republican majority hasn't been elected, maybe it's 2020 or something like that. Okay, well, something's got to give. Yeah, I get that. I think most of the voters in my district would understand that, appreciate that as well. But again, that is not what happened here. You know, what happened here was you did have a Republican majority, and rather than, you know, trying to form that Republican majority with all 21, the decision was made very early on that was unacceptable. You know, again, just like in the Senate, there's certain legislators, Republicans, that we just can't work with, me being one of them, of course, and we're not going to go there. So Louise and I were basically told, you know, sorry, you know, you're SOL. And that's one way of doing it, but that does not honor the voters. Certainly isn't, you know, respect for those who the voters elected. And so, you know, the fact of you know, what the title of the minority caucus, you know, is not, you know, that's not what's most important. What's most important is, all right, you know, we're here to serve the people of Alaska. And if you are trying to serve the people of Alaska, then you're naturally, like you were just saying, you've got some things that you want to take care of, whether it's PFD, whether that's defined benefits, what have you. And so you're going to put together an organization based on, you know, that agenda. And again, for the fourth time in my 4 legislature experience, the Republicans did not do that. You know, I can look back on the last, you know, 3 terms that we just had as Republicans. There was almost no agreement on policy. And you had, you know, folks like Kelly Merrick that were part of the caucus, and you had other folks on the other end, you know, the Steve Thompsons, whatnot, which, you know, if you look at their voting record, they were voting with Louise Stutz and Bryce Edgman most of the time. And you know, an astronomically high amount of the time. Whenever there's a party line vote, you can almost be guaranteed there are at least a couple members of the Republican caucus that are going to vote with the Democrats. You know, even though there was 18 elected one time, and, you know, different numbers, different times, it was usually about 14 of us that actually held the line and adopted, you know, the Republican position when it came time to vote. And that wasn't secret. Everybody could know that. You look at the voting board, you say, wow, they vote with the Democrats a lot. So it wasn't about particular agenda items or ideology. There was opportunity for that. I think there should have been a strong minority to, have an agenda that they could, put up and contrast, at least, in principle, with the majority. And that really never materialized. Certainly not in any kind of robust fashion. Yeah, there were some press releases every now and again. But again, we have a House that is organized based on the idea that they need to be in the majority no matter what. And that's what happened. They're now in the majority no matter what. Bryce Edgman has a controlling interest in that caucus. He can say no, and the caucus stops dead in its tracks because they cannot move forward without his support or his team.
We're winding down here, so I have one final question, and this is the thing that I'm having the hardest time with, because you say that this Republican-led majority is a binding caucus, and yet I have had multiple legislators on the program saying, no, absolutely not. We've not guaranteed any vote. We've not guaranteed any of it. So are you saying that these people are all fibbing? Are they all lying? Are they all misleading us? I mean, what are you saying? Because again, like I said, we just had Sarah Vance on who said, no, I have not guaranteed my vote for anything. I want to read the bill before I vote on it. Same thing that others have said, Will Stapp and Kevin McCabe and others. So are you asserting that they're all misleading us? Is that what you're saying?
There's been an agreement not to call the current caucus a binding caucus. Yeah, that's obvious. And that was a political necessity because several of its members, are from districts that detest the idea of a binding caucus. And so the idea that they joined one is politically intolerable to some of their constituents. And they have taken efforts to try and reshape the idea of the binding caucus, but we knew they were going to do that. And I've talked with others who have been fighting the binding caucus, and my district has been at war with the binding caucus for 14 years. Since my Senator Lyda Green was president of a bipartisan binding caucus in the Senate back many years ago, and we've seen this play out iteration after iteration. And frankly, we knew at some point you get to a point where they were willing to change the rhetoric and not call it a binding caucus. They haven't gotten there yet in the Senate, but we thought, last time maybe they were moving in that direction, but now they're back to calling it a binding caucus. In the House, we've now moved for the first time to not calling it a binding caucus. And that's, one of the stepping stones on the way to victory, but it doesn't fundamentally change what is wrong with the whole binding caucus concept. The fact that you call it something else doesn't help. But today there was, a decision made, last year, in fact, that, you can only be part of this conversation if you're willing to help us pass the budget. And I was told that repeatedly. And in fact, I was, told that by a member of the majority, even, like a week before we gavelled in to be sworn in. He goes, hey, unless you're willing to help us pass the budget, with your vote, then you can't be, part of the caucus. I mean, we all know that's the case. Every member of that caucus knows that's the case. They know that I wasn't, invited to be part of it. You can come up with all sorts of reasons about, why I'm hard to work with or whatever, but fundamentally that's the issue. The issue is a $14 billion budget. They wanted to organize a caucus based on passing it. They can't conceive of organizing a caucus like you were talking about based on, Republican voters and elections and so forth. And so based on that, it now needs to be organized based on a bill, House Bill 39 in this case. And the idea that, we could have a process that results in that bill going forward and not passing and then needing to turn to the public and saying, hey, public, you've got stake in this, help us get the votes needed to pass this, decent budget. In fact, you might see that in 49 other states. But the idea is
David, I'm out of time. David, I'm out of time. Thank you for coming on board. Folks, we're out of time. Tomorrow's Firearms Friday. Jacob Sullum, Chris Chang. We will see you tomorrow. Have a great day. David, I'll let you finish your thought, and I have a one rebuttal, and then we'll finish this up here real quick. But I'll let you finish your thought real quick.
No, glad to hear the rebuttal. The idea that you could end up with a bill that goes to the floor, in this case, the budget bill, but really it could be any bill. And that, somehow, wouldn't pass the first time. Maybe like in Congress, you had conservatives go 15 rounds over the speaker bill. We could have done that in Alaska. We frankly decided to, wave the white flag before round one had even happened. And so there were no 14, rounds of battle, and there wasn't a conservative victory there because, we said, we cried uncle at the outset. And the same thing with any bill that comes before the House, that the majority has decided that they're not going to allow it to come to the House for a vote until they already have lined up the votes for it to pass. That's why, in the 6 years I've been in the legislature, you've never seen a bill come before the legislature except for one, which was the hospital, patient advocate bill, that didn't actually pass. And right now, we need to move in the direction of allowing the process to work itself out with the public's involvement. And maybe you don't get your 21 votes for the budget in the first time. Maybe you only have 19. And then you allow the public to weigh in. And then you allow, negotiations and positions to change and so forth. But just understand that could not be tolerated under the current arrangement, because that would be a test of cohesiveness of the majority right now. And that would be seen as the end of the majority because they didn't have enough votes to put forward their agenda. It shouldn't be, but that's the way they look at it.
I guess my rebuttal is this, because again, it was kind of a yes or no question, and we got long-winded there on it. But you're asserting basically that these people are misleading us, that it is a binding caucus, but they're trying to deceive and inveigle us to say that it's not a binding caucus. That's what you're saying.
It's a lot of equivocation, and some of the freshmen, are probably doing so innocuously because they don't, understand. All right, what is a binding caucus and why is it bad? My district has a much better idea of what a binding caucus is because we've seen it so many times.
Well, and again, I'm not disagreeing that there has been a binding caucus in years past. I've been fighting about this and angry about the binding caucus for 15 years. But when legislator after legislator says we have not guaranteed our vote for anything, we have not given our guarantee that we're going to vote for a budget, that it's going to go through the whole process, then I have a hard time saying that that's equivocation. When they flat out said it's not, we've not guaranteed our vote for anything.
Sure. Well, and I can say that too. No, none of us have guaranteed our votes for anything. We simply, hide behind the idea that, well, we are committed to intending to vote for the budget, or we're committed to, making sure that the majority, budget passes and so forth. But the design that they have created for this particular caucus, this particular time, is that the budget bill is going to come out of House Finance. They're all going to get into a room, and 23 of them are going to decide what's in the budget. When they come out of that room, they will have agreement, and they will make sure that it passes. Now, tell me how that isn't a binding caucus.
David Eastman, our guest, thank you for coming on board and sharing your thoughts with us on this. We will. I guess we'll see when the votes are counted where things lay and where the budget is. I appreciate you coming on board and joining us today. Thanks for being part of it. All right, folks, again, tomorrow is Firearms Friday. It will be, of course, Jacob Sullivan and Willie Waffle. We're going to have a good discussion tomorrow. Looking forward to it. All right, till then, have a great day. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. Woo, baby.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.